Hello, everybody. I'm Don Counts, and we're in Nashville, Tennessee, and I have Larry Taft with me and Ronnie Carter. First of all, Ronnie, tell us who we have today.
Today we have with us Ronnie Bargatze, a guy that everybody in the state of Tennessee knows, not to mention outside the state. But Ronnie's career is unbelievable from when he started as an athlete in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and starts there and literally goes through playing ball in high school and college, great athlete, then turns around and becomes a great coach all over. And then after that, if that was not enough, he then gets into the business of helping TSSAA literally do all kinds of things, which we'll talk about as he goes.
Let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you grew up.
I grew up in southeast Nashville when it was really in the country. Went to Antioch High School, so it was 7 more miles out in the country from where I lived. Played 3 sports there, football, basketball, baseball, and was really fortunate to play under really good coaches. Bill Stanfield and Jimmy Joe Jackson in football, Harry Moneypenny in basketball, and the famous Gerald Johnson, Mama Johnson, who probably, if I picked one coach to play for in my life, it would be him.
Larry, you mentioned Mama. What was it like for a young kid to be playing for somebody as old school as Gerald was, even though he wasn't old at that point?
He was definitely old school, and people always ask me when I talk about him, or he gets in a conversation, how did he get that nickname, Mama Johnson? Because everybody called him Mama Johnson. And I asked him that one time, and he said, I don't tell many people this, but he said, I was playing ball one day, and I was the only one in my neighborhood in Franklin. He lived out on Del Rio Pike in Franklin, and his uncle gave him a basketball once. And he said, I was the only guy in my neighborhood that had a basketball. And I got mad one day. I've heard this from the people who were with him that day, Billy Isaacs and some guys like that. How did he get that name? And what he told me was exactly what they had told me, that Gerald could get mad at somebody in a hurry, and in some cases could stay mad for years. But he was really a great guy, character, and somebody called a foul on him in a pickup basketball game, and he disagreed with the call. He took his ball and went home, and they all mocked him because he's going to go home to Mama because he got upset on the pickup game.
And Mama Johnson goes on from there.
And he goes on from there. I tell you, what a guy he was. I spent a lot of time with him after we were together on the baseball field or football field. He was slated to be the next football coach at Antioch after Bill Stanfield left. And as he tells it, politics got involved, and he was hired. He came in second to Jimmy Joe Jackson by a crowd from Garrett Drugs soda fountain conversation, and Jimmy Joe Jackson got the job over him, and he carried that grudge for many years.
Well, he was a good coach, and I believe you all went to the state finals in baseball.
Yes, my junior year we went to the state finals and got beat. We had a guy named John Morgan who was a great athlete and playing center field for us. And we were playing on a field that had been scraped totally. It was a solid dirt field called Toby Park at the time. And the last thing he told us before we went out, he said, unless it's the tying or winning run, get down in front of ground balls hit to you. Make sure you keep the ball in front of you, and so you don't give up extra bases. The first guy up in the game, the first guy to get a hit was Steve Spurrier, who hit a ground ball up the middle, and John Morgan came in and on the dead run, reaches down to scoop it up and then throw it into the infield, and all of a sudden look behind him because his glove was right over the ball and it rolled to the fence, and Spurrier goes all the way around for an inside the park Little League home run.
after Antioch and after all you're playing at Antioch, tell me what goes on then in your life and what's next.
Well, I wanted to play. I was recruited in baseball by 2 or 3 schools, but I really wanted to play basketball too, but I wasn't good enough. So I pretty much recruited myself to Belmont, and as fortune was having it, I played very little as a freshman, but then we had 2 upper-class guards who had domestic issues back home, and both of them left. So Kenny Sidwell, who came in as the new coach my sophomore year, had no choice but to live through my turnovers, and I had many of them. At one point, after a few games, I had more turnovers than I did points. But we actually got a little better after that, and we ended up my junior year at Belmont. We won the VSAC Western Division. That was a great league. As people don't realize that, but you had the VSAC Volunteer State Athletic Conference, had the Eastern Division, which Carson Newman kind of dominated. And on the western side, it got passed around. UT Martin was always good. Bethel, Lambeth, no longer a school, but it was a really good, solid program. Union University, and so it was really a great, perfect for a guy like me, slow white guy, and I had to overcome a lot of stuff to be able to play at that level. But I probably played more hours on the basketball court because I really wanted to play basketball in college, and we ended up having good teams. And then my senior year, Kenny Sidwell was there. My sophomore, junior year, then he went to Tennessee Tech as head coach, and Wayne Dobbs took his job, and Wayne was my coach at Belmont when I was a senior. And of course, we went on and coached together at Vandy.
I was fixing to say, and the friendship with Wayne Dobbs starts there.
Yeah, matter of fact, Wayne was at George Washington University, and he had a blow up with a SID who put out a press release he didn't like, and Wayne is one of those guys. He had an edge about him also. So he and the SID got into it, and actually a fight ensued, and he got fired. So he was at GW in Washington D.C., and I was up there on a recruiting trip, and I said, "Why don't you come down and coach with us at Vandy? We're one coach shy at this time." And he did. That's how he got to Vanderbilt.
That's how Wayne Dobbs gets to Vanderbilt.
That's correct.
And then the Vanderbilt staff is who?
Was Coach Skinner. Now, this was not the Jerry Stackhouse staff. We had 13 people on it. We were lucky to have 3, a head coach and 2 assistants. And so Roy Skinner was the head coach, and we had a few others that rotated in and out. Roger Couch, Harold Hunter from TSU was on the staff one year, but there was 2 assistants, and Roy Skinner was the head coach.
Okay, where then do you go coaching college-wise from Vanderbilt?
Well, I'd been there for 10 years, and so I decided I wanted to be a head coach, and I passed up a couple jobs. I passed up the Belmont job one time while I was an assistant at Vandy because, I was at Vanderbilt and we had good teams, and so I was still pretty young. I went there when I was 26, and so people are always looking for a young coach who's had some success. And Vandy had really good teams throughout the early 70s, and so I had several opportunities to go to Samford and to Belmont, Georgia Tech as an assistant, but I didn't want to leave, and then I did want to leave because I wanted to be a head coach. So I was reading the newspaper one morning, the Tennessean, Larry, and I saw where Elmore Vale, who coached the 2 and 23 Trevecca Trojans, had decided to retire. So I got on. I called the school, and I called for the president of the school, and I got through to him at Trevecca and says, I'd been piddling around in some building and real estate type of things, and And I thought, well, maybe I could coach at Trevecca and do that too. And I called him and asked him, the president, if that was a possibility. And he said, well, Jerry Hull, our dean of students, was responsible for athletics. So he calls Jerry up and asked him if he would want to talk to me about the job. And Jerry says, there's no assistant coach at Vanderbilt that wants to come to Trevecca. You know, plus we were 2-24 or whatever it was. And sure enough, the job, Jerry Hull, the guy at Trevecca who was responsible for athletics, was an usher at Vanderbilt basketball games. So he knew my name and knew me and a little bit. And so the next day I was hired at Trevecca.
Now we got to go back and get one nice little touch to the Ronnie Bargatze career. Did you ever coach in high school?
Oh, of course I did. Kenny Sidwell had gone from Belmont to Tennessee Tech as head coach, and the State Board of Education met in Nashville, and he ran into a guy named Buzz Kennedy, who was an executive with Stokely Van Camp in Newport. So the guy he asked if he knew any coach they might get to come to Newport at Cott County High School. And Kenny Sidwell gave my name to him, and he called me up and offered me the job on the telephone. Never met him before. I didn't know where Newport was. I was looking on a map up and down the Mississippi River, couldn't find Cott County. And so I found out that Newport was on the Pigeon River instead of the Mississippi River. So I went 250 miles one direction and instead of the other.
You had some success up there in boys basketball.
Well, the girls were better than the boys, but not if they played each other. But we had good teams, girls and boys, and had a very enjoyable time. And my point guard on that team was Benny Profit, who went on to play at Belmont. And Benny is a great guy. He has a ministry now called First Priority. And Benny was a great guy to coach. He's had a great career and has really done a lot of great things with kids, particularly.
Going back to Belmont, you probably, more than most people, have seen the Belmont and Lipscomb rivalry for so many years and from all different angles, from alum to coach to everything else. What is that rivalry meant to Nashville and the community as far as sports are concerned?
Well, I think it was 1992. Joe Biddle and Rick Region and I decided over a sandwich one day that we wanted to start a club in Nashville called the Nashville Athletic Club. And we did. We got a napkin out and sort of decided we wanted to have meetings, have speakers come in and do some projects for, as it turned out, we picked the Burn Center at Vanderbilt Hospital as our civic project. And from that meeting and that small organization, we had several meetings where we had nice speakers come in. We had some great crowds. I'll never forget, Ray Mears came in one night and he lit up the room, and he was amongst a lot of Vanderbilt people, and he really enjoyed the attention he got. And he was somewhat of a controversial coach, a great promoter, and I'll never forget the day he told me, even he and I became really good friends later in my career. Matter of fact, he offered me a job there once, and I didn't take it because I'd just signed Mike Rhodes, and the year before that, Charles Davis and Tommy Springer and that crew. And I just couldn't feel. I felt like I was running out on them if I left, and particularly to go to the biggest rival. And so we became good friends. When he was at UT Martin as athletic director, that's when we had the Music City Jammers basketball team, and we had a terrible team to start with, but we got better as the year went on. And so Larry Schmittou and the owners of the Sounds were the owners of the team. And one day Larry says, well, we're in last place. Why don't we cut our expenses and get the heck out of Dodge? So Tommy Smith, I brought Tommy Smith in as our coach about 2/3 of the way through the season. We were in last place in the league. Tommy Smith did a phenomenal job coaching that team. Matter of fact, it will never get the credit he deserves or that accomplishment. But we went on to beat Huntsville, Greenville, and Mid-Michigan, which was coached by Cassie Russell, who dominated the league in regular season. We went on to beat those three teams and win the GBA, Global Basketball Association Championship. And I attribute that because we got it down to 8 players from a 10-player roster to 8, saved some money, and won the championship. What else could ownership ask for?
Well, going back then, one more place we've got to talk about before we come back to high school sports. How do you get to Austin Peay?
Well, I was coaching at Trevecca, and we were able to turn things around there pretty well, and we got a little bit of a reputation. I was still decently young. I was 36 at that time, and I had interviewed for the Austin Peay job earlier before another coach was hired, so I ended up succeeding him, and Johnny Miller, who I'd known mainly at that time through TSSAA, although I knew Johnny as a high school football coach. And so I was hired to go to Austin Peay and be the basketball coach. I went there in 1979.
And then as the coaching career continues on, then all of a sudden you come into contact with TSSAA in a lot of roles.
Yeah, well,
talk about those roles.
Well, as we get to that, one of the things that led to that was when I was at Tennessee Tech, I was very good friends with Watson Brown and his family. I went to a lot of those Saturday morning coaching get-togethers at Brown Watson Sporting Goods there in Cookeville. And so when I went to Vanderbilt, Watson also went to Vanderbilt. And then the next year, Mac came. So I knew their family very well. And so Watson and I were called to a meeting one day at Austin Peay, and that was from the president and the athletic director. And they told us that we were going to go to Division II and leave Division I because we are out of money and we can't operate. We're going to cut basketball scholarships down to 10 from 13, and football lost 5 scholarships and 2 coaching jobs. And Louis Thompson, who's in this group, was assistant coach under Watson at that time. So that was kind of the cut, because I gotta go back to the original. What was the original? Oh yeah. So I stayed there. We had this meeting, and Watson and I.
One of the great meetings of all time.
It is. So we leave that meeting over in the president's office and walk back over to the Dunn Center where our offices were. And Watson, in somewhat colorful language he rarely used, he said, "I'm getting out of here." So he said, I don't want to be a Division II coach. I don't want to lose scholarships. I don't want to lose staff. And so I'm leaving. Well, I hung around for one more year, but he left and went to Memphis State as offensive coordinator and stayed for a few weeks and left and came back to Vanderbilt as offensive coordinator. And then I stayed one more year, and then I retired, and they hired my assistant coach, Howard Jackson, as the head coach. And Howard stayed for 3 years, and then they brought Lake Kelly back in. And ironically, Lake Kelly had been Howard's coach, who was a great player at Austin Peay, had 22 rebounds against Kentucky at Vanderbilt in the Mideast Regional Tournament one time.
Then you come into contact, and at this particular time in your career, with TSSAA in all kinds of roles. Talk about it a little bit.
Well, mainly through you, really, Ronnie, because I'd always been very interested in, and to this day, my favorite level of sports are high school sports. And I just had such a great experience at Antioch, and the NIL was a different meaning for that term now. NIL is a bad word because that's the name, image, and likeness for players getting paid. But that was the National Interscholastic League, which was a great league to be in and highly publicized. I mean, it wasn't too hard. All you had to do is show up and breathe, and you could get your name in the paper. And so the NIL kind of was driven, I think, at that time by keeping up with other teams and having rivalries, schools or neighborhood schools that didn't like each other too well. I mean, we could go down the list. And our big rival was Central, Antioch and Central. And then Antioch and Donaldson was also one because the two school zones met. But I loved high school sports, still do. And to watch, to be a part of that and to know the people who are administering things at TSSAA was a great thrill. And I was out of coaching now, so that was my sports outlet there. Was pretty much being a full year-round fan of high school sports.
And then at that particular time, all kinds of things started happening with TSSAA. Share a little bit of what some of those things were.
Right. C.M. Newton had asked me to come back and be the color analyst on the Vanderbilt Basketball Network. And then you and I talked, I think, in 85 or 86, and you said, I want to do a package getting high school sports statewide. And so I was there on the ground floor with you as we started telecasting state championship events, Memphis to Bristol, and I felt fortunate to be a part of that, and have to this day stayed very involved with the TSSAA, which in some circles, particularly back when the A.F. Bridges years, TSSAA was the bad guy who came in and put teams and coaches and people on probation for misbehaving. And so that was the connotation that TSSAA had in some people's minds, kind of being the enforcer, bad guy on situations that were more than well deserved, because you know how these knucklehead coaches are. They go out, they'll do anything to win games, and their communities follow right behind them. So there was a lot of feelings, some on the negative side, about being scrutinized closer than they wanted to be. But that started my run as being, I did the games on TV for 37 years, and I discovered that there are prettier faces and better voices than mine. So I stepped aside 2 years ago to open the door for other people to do what I did.
And so you did with TSSAA 37 years on TV, covering everything. But one of the great stories was when all of a sudden we've been doing basketball and we're going to do football.
Right.
And Gil Gideon, the director, comes to me and he says, we need to find a good color man for football. And I said, RB is going to be the greatest we can do because he knows all the people. And Gil says, but does he know football? And then I said, I think he'll do fine. And then something happens in the first football championship we televise. Go through that. Do you remember it at Jefferson County?
Well, that was interesting because Jefferson County was in there, and that's next door to Cocke County in East Tennessee. And one of the ball boys that I had on my basketball team at Cocke County High School was a guy that had a little success in coaching football, Craig Kisbeth. And And you said something about Craig Kismet. I said, oh yeah, he was my ball boy at Newport. But Craig had a great coaching career at Jefferson County High School, and
Where it happened to be in the first game we televised in football on TV.
right. So I didn't have too much trouble getting an interview with him. I knew too much stuff on him and his family.
That's exact. And then after doing all of the broadcasting for years, you also then get involved with us through your work at that time then with Baptist Hospital.
Correct. Baptist Hospital, behind the efforts and interest of Burton Elrod, wanted to, he loved high school sports, and he had a chance to go to Baptist and be the kind of the top rung on the ladder in terms of being an orthopedic surgeon. But the first thing we did is we went and met with the Surgeon General of the United States, and who heartily endorsed, public-private putting their resources together, and the kids get the advantage of that. So we started a program called the Right Team Program, and Baptist Hospital Sports Medicine sponsored that program by hiring a staff to go into the schools, and they ended up calling it the Right Team Program because kids were so vulnerable in making bad decisions. The objective was to make the right decision, and so it was a kind of an anti-alcohol, tobacco, drug program for the schools. And we had myself and 2 other people that went into schools regularly, and we set up captains in each school, a boy and girl athlete usually, who were leaders and well known in their programs. They could be good peer leaders for their other athletes in the school. And to this day, I still have a great relationship with a lot of those kids who in 1985, 88, in that area, now are lawyers, doctors, what have you, and many of them who participated in our programs with the TSSAA. The summer camp we call SASI, Student Athlete Summer Institute, is the acronym, and we would, they were leaders in the school, and it's funny how that happens. Leaders in the schools usually become leaders in real life, and so I think we made some good contributions and along those lines to get those programs started.
And then as things move along in another phase of your life, you come into contact with somebody kin to you in your family that all of a sudden comes and becomes involved with TSSAA. Share that story.
Yeah. I have a cousin named Stephen Bargatze, and Stephen was always kind of my favorite little cousin, and so he and I were very close. And I was going on a recruiting trip to Indianapolis, and I stopped in Louisville to see their family and say hello to them. Stephen had just graduated from Butler High School in Louisville, and so Stephen and I were very close, and he had, I might as well tell the story of how Stephen got started in his chosen profession. Stephen went to a McDonald's restaurant when he was about 6 years old, and they had a clown there who was also a magician, and Stephen was fascinated that this guy made things disappear, and it was literally magic to him. And so Stephen began a career doing the same thing. He was Yo-Yo the Clown. He had a clown outfit on, but he did magic for kids. And Stephen loved the impact it had on him, so he wanted to do it for other kids. And lo and behold, if he doesn't, if he's available, and there's a lady that you and I both know who said, well, why don't y'all hire Stephen to come in and help with that student services program, go into the schools and do the magic and have a message with that magic and have some impact on kids. So Stephen did just that, and was very popular, and not only worked for the TSSAA, but people that was exposed to him wanted him to come and do things for them. So he was very much in demand and very, very effective in what he did. And somehow or another had 3 kids, one of whom is Nate Bargatze, and most people know Nate by his comedy right now. He's the #1 ranked stand-up comedian in the country. And so let's just say that the TSSAA helped spawn the best comedian in the country right now.
And you have to go back and talk about Stephen's work with the students all over the state of Tennessee, and then his work also in all of our schools, because literally he was doing in-service training programs and doing faculty meeting, everything in the world with our teachers and coaches all across the state.
I'll never forget this. We would go to different schools and offer them the services, and I was still working kind of part-time with TSSAA. And I remember Gene Litterer was a principal at Hillsborough High School. And I said, Ms. Litterer, we need to bring Stephen in here and let him speak to the students. She said, oh, no. She said, well, they won't behave, they won't listen. They'll be throwing paper wads at each other and horsing around. And I'll never be able to keep them under control. So I'm afraid they won't even listen to him. Well, Stephen gets up, and with the unusual ability he had, he captured the imagination of these students to the point where he was totally had them mesmerized, and they listened not only to every word he said, but wanted to react in a positive way to that. And at the end of that program, Ms. Litterer says, she said, I had faculty members on each aisle, 3 deep, on all 4 aisles. She said, they never said a word. They never made a peep. That was great. And so that tells you what Stephen has the ability with kids 5 or 6 years old all the way through adults, because the magic gets their attention, and then he has a message to go with it, which is very effective.
He ends up spending 25 to 30 years working in schools all across the state of Tennessee.
Yeah. How many negative reports did you get from him?
None. Oh, never got a negative report. All we got was, how can we get him back?
Yeah, exactly.
And our goal then was to not let any of the other state associations know about it. Now that changes at a point in time also, and then guy called and was asking me to speak, and then at a big function they were having with the parents all over, and I said, let me send you someone else from our staff. When I gave him background about Stephen, he said, Ron, it doesn't sound like he's going to work out too well. Literally, that's probably back in the 90s or somewhere in there, but literally at that particular stage, the next thing you know, he's got Stephen, and that's the only person they ever used the rest of the time with their stuff.
Right. Well, Stephen came to live with me on that visit I went by to see him on in 1975. He came and lived with me and spent the weekend with me, and he stayed 4 years. I couldn't get rid of him then, but he ended up going back to school at Trevecca, getting his degree, and having been able to coach and teach on the high school level for a while. And he started out at Coopertown Elementary School, and now it advanced to being, I guess, doing his thing in front of literally tens of thousands of people every year, and on TV specials and all that sort of thing.
And the Bargatze name with you and with Stephen and now even Nate has gone through schools all over the state of Tennessee. It's a great story. Larry?
First time I ever met you, you were freshman basketball coach at Tennessee Tech, and I was a student assistant in the sports information office. And
was Doug Stone there then?
Doug Stone had just come in to be the SID from Southern Illinois. And coming from a small rural area in Lincoln County, I just didn't imagine that somebody who was going to be the freshman basketball coach was also going to be the head baseball coach. And if you look at your career over time, you've been able to be adaptable and adjustable and whatever, and whether it's in sports or sports related or in private business. How have you done that for all your life?
I don't have any idea, Larry. Just a love of sports is the basis of everything for me. And so I've been fortunate. I've been around a lot of great people. I've played for great coaches. And one of my favorite guys ever is Bill Stanfield, who became a great principal in Nashville, but he also was a great high school football coach. And I remember the first day of school, I walked down the hallway and he called me over and he says, "Hold your hands out." So he looked at my hands. He says, "You're going to be my quarterback." So I ended up being a quarterback and then Jimmy Joe Jackson came in and we moved to single wing, so I became a tailback then and not a quarterback. But Bill Stanfield was a great man and a great career, and I really learned a lot from him.
I think it's only fitting that we end in this little interview with you telling one of the great athletic stories of all time, and that's with Bill Stanfield and you're playing ball.
Well, I was not exactly the most street smart guy. I lived in a little subdivision over by the airport, and I didn't, I'm kind of like Nate says, he says, there's certain words you can't use around my house, like darn and crap and stuff like that. So Bill Stanfield and Gerald Johnson are coaching. I was a sophomore. I didn't play much as a freshman in high school in football, but as a sophomore, we got a big lead on Mount Juliet, and they were going to be passing a lot. Well, I wanted to get in on the action, so I was a little over eager, and we knew they'd be passing, or I didn't know it then because I wasn't smart enough to, but the coaches knew it. And so I was playing cornerback, and I kept getting up on the line like I was a defensive end. I wanted to try to, tackle somebody or get in on the play. And Gerald Johnson says, "Bargatze, loosen up." He meant for me to get back deeper because of the situation for passing. And I couldn't really hear him exactly, and he said, "Bargatze, loosen up." So I started doing side straddle hops. And that story followed me all the way through high school, college, and probably Tennessee Tech.
Nod. All right. We've had Ronnie Carter to my left and Larry Taft to my right. Ronnie, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.